Trump is so unpopular, he got to resort to trying to suppress the vote to rig the 2026 midterms. I mean, his polling numbers are historically bad. Even the Trump propaganda channel Fox News new polls show that his job approval rate with Americans is at an all-time low. With numbers that low, the midterms going to be a bloodbath for Republicans. And Trump know that, and he know that if he lose Congress, he will be impeached.
I would have to imagine that guardrails would be an understatement of what would happen should you lose the House or the Senate. There's been talk of impeachment. You've been through this before.
Yeah.
You've been through it multiple times.
I'm a professional.
What will happen? What will happen?
It's not a good thing.
They'll probably try and impeach me. They'll say he went to Iowa and he spoke unfairly to people and he's not supposed to do that.
Hey, don't threaten me with a good time. But look, his back is against the wall. And instead of trying to listen to what people are saying and doing things that the American people want, he would rather just try and rig the vote. He doing this by asking Congress to pass the Save America Act, which is basically just a voter suppression bill. He lobbying the Supreme Court to ban mail-in voting, which he just used this week. And he also holding these sham investigations into old elections around the country, Arizona and a couple of other places, trying to justify federalizing elections for the midterms, which is not legal in the United States per the Constitution. And the voter fraud rate in the United States is like 0.0001% or something like that. I want to pause right there and ask everybody to take a second and subscribe to my YouTube page and sign up for my email list. That's the best way to stay in the loop on all things politics with Steve. Now let's get back to it. So look, this guy is desperate to rig the vote. He knows the state of the economy is trash right now. The national average for gas is $1 more than it was last month. Forbes say inflation may hit 4.2%, so prices are going up. The U.S. stock market had its biggest loss today since the war started. You know, he promised everybody's 401ks would be booming when he took office, and mortgage rates are on a rise since the war in Iran started. And he promised the exact opposite of this.
Together we will deliver low taxes, low regulations, low energy costs, low interest rates, low inflation, so that everyone can afford groceries, a car, and a home. Very simple.
Over 62% of people disapprove his handling of the economy. That is way worse numbers than Joe Biden ever got. Some of the top people in the MAGA or conservative movement turned against him because of the war in Iran, like Tucker Carlson, his former director of National Counterintelligence Office, Joe Kent, and a lot of Republicans in Congress. Just look at this NBC News post that says some Republicans say they're frustrated that Trump is fixated on an election bill that won't pass and wish he put that same amount of political capital into moving bills to lower the cost of living ahead of midterm elections, which their majorities in Congress are on the line. So the Senate just left town for the Easter break, but they've been telling him they weren't going to pass this bill, so I'm not surprised they didn't do it before they left. So now he got to turn to things like this Save America Act to literally stop people from voting. Lately, he's been saying this is his number one priority. Like he ain't managing a terrible war in Iran or, you know, TSA agents ain't being paid right now. This is his number one priority. He claimed it's going to help fight voter fraud by non-citizens. The Constitution already banned non-citizens from voting. I seen somebody write on Threads, I think, the Cleveland Browns have more starting quarterbacks since 1999 than illegal immigrants that voted in federal elections. I thought that was funny as hell. I had to look it up to see if it was true. It was actually true. That's crazy. But state election boards say instances of non-citizens voting is extremely rare. There is literally no evidence anywhere that there is a voter fraud problem in the United States. I challenge anybody listening to this to find any evidence of, you know, widespread voter fraud within the United States outside of Trump's own words, and I will eat my words. I mean, Trump lost over 60 court cases over the exact same thing in regards to the 2020 election. A lot of those were conservative judges. Some of them was judges that he appointed. So I don't want to hear no activist judge anything. Voter fraud is literally not a problem. They asked the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to give just one example of what type of voter fraud this bill will then target. Dude said, I'm not going to litigate that to y'all right now. That's code for this bill ain't solving no problem. It's actually making problems. I want y'all to listen to that right now.
When making the argument to Democrats to vote yes for this, because it will require Democrat votes, Can you give for me one example of fraud conducted in a previous election that the Save America Act would prevent?
Look, we're not going to litigate all that. I can tell you what I'll tell Democrats. You should listen to the American people.
Now, that's a very fair question. What the reporter is saying, what situations would this bill prevent that we've seen in the past? Because they shouldn't be creating a rule if there was no problem that you could point to that this rule is fixing. Now, a lot of people is confusing the SAVE Act as being a voter ID act. That is not what this is. With the Save America Act, you need multiple forms of ID. You can't use a state ID, a college ID, a work ID. You need things like a passport or a birth certificate. This is just putting unnecessary obstacles in the way. Like, why can't you use your driver's license? And to make things worse, the Trump administration is closing passport services at local libraries across the U.S., making this problem even worse. So, for instance, if somebody was a college student, they likely got all of their documents back at home with their parents. But that's exactly what Trump is hoping for because he's extremely unpopular with that demographic. Kamala Harris won college graduates and voters making at least $100,000 a year. Trump won people with no college degrees and making lower salaries. And if you married and you changed your last name and you want to vote, you probably cooked. Obviously, if you married, your last name may not match what's on your birth certificate. But again, he's very unpopular with women, so that's probably by design. So this SAVE Act is meant to make it harder to vote, harder to register to vote. According to one of the most far-right organizations on the planet, the Heritage Foundation, only 68 non-citizens voted in U.S. elections since 1982. The current director of the FBI, Kash Patel, the not serious guy whose email just got hacked by Iran today, but still, he's the director of the FBI, and it's his job to investigate any alleged voter fraud, especially by non-citizens. But listen to what he said when he was questioned by Congress in regards to this voter fraud by non-citizens.
Director Patel, how many non-citizens have been convicted of voting in U.S. elections in the last 10 years?
The conviction stats are with the Department of Justice. I defer to them on that.
You are the director of the FBI. Give me a guess. How many convictions in the last 1 year, 5 year, or 10 years? Ballpark.
I don't have that with me, sir. Again, it's with the department.
You don't have that. Okay. Director Patel, how many active investigations does the FBI have into foreign individuals voting in U.S. elections?
We have a number of investigations, generally speaking, ongoing about individuals across the country.
Yeah, I'm asking for that number.
I don't have that number with me, but I have a number of them.
So passing the Save America Act will prevent almost 21 million legal voters, people that have the right to vote in the United States, from voting, when estimates of non-citizens voting since 1982 is 82 people? That's less than 10 people per election cycle. And somebody needs to ask Trump if the Save America Act needs to save our elections because they've been so rigged for so long. How did he win in 2024? If he lost the election in 2020 because it was rigged, why wouldn't the Democrats just rig the election again in 2024? Like, why is he in office if this voter fraud is just such a big deal? Earlier this week, the Supreme Court heard arguments on a case that could limit mail-in voting. Now, mail-in voting is another one of those things that Trump just, complain about all day, say it's so unfair. But it's wild because he just voted by mail in an election this week in Florida. It was a Florida special election. And not only did he vote by mail, almost his whole family voted by mail. Not to mention over 26% of his voters voted by mail in the 2024 election. He didn't have a problem with that when he won, did he? You got to think about veterans and older Americans that can't get physically out to the polls, people that's traveling on election day. All these people wouldn't be able to vote if he restricted vote by mail. And Trump wants to expand this restriction and stop people that's sick, disabled, even serving in the military or just traveling from voting by mail. Another thing he's been doing is talking about federalizing elections. I seen an article from the Washington Post saying Trump seeks executive power over elections. And y'all know where he get this from, right? In Russia, elections are federalized. Their elections are ran by a state-created organization consisting of like 15 members. These people are appointed by the federal government, which is Putin, And they oversee all of the planning, voting, counting, and certification of elections nationwide. The result of that is Vladimir Putin ain't lost the election yet. But here in the US, states have the responsibility to administer elections. The states always ran their elections. Any new requirement that put the federal government in charge of any elections is literally unconstitutional. I think everybody living in the United States needs to understand. Voting in these midterms may be the last real chance we have at saving our country. The only thing that can stop the president in the United States is Congress, and the Republican members of Congress are not going to hold Trump accountable for anything. I have zero confidence that they will ever intervene in any meaningful way. So with that being said, the Democrats have to win the midterms. And at that point, all Trump would be is an angry old guy shouting into a microphone. But again, the president does not have a lot of power without Congress.